Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Farthest Frontier. This is our town homestead, year 54, and there's a lot to talk about this town, right? But right now, let's talk a bit more about farming. Farming is quite interesting in this game because it provides various different food in a large quantity, but of course, it doesn't come easy. It requires planning, it takes time, and it takes some effort to get going. So, what do I mean by that? Well, number one, it takes a lot of time and labor work. It requires constant upkeep, and of course, you have to monitor and adjust something almost every year. And sometime the harvest will not yield enough food to go around if you don't properly plan it, if you don't properly monitor it, and if you don't properly keep up with the constant adjustment. So that's number one. But if that is done right, then obviously there's a lot of food to go around, and that can be used not only to sustain the town, but of course you can monetize it by selling it in trading posts. So anyway, let's talk more about farming. Another thing about farming is the soil itself. So, like for example, if we look at our uh, fertility score here for our land, then we can see that there is a green area, there is a yellow area, and if you go further out, there's even a little bit of brown area, and that's basically the condition of the soil it's in. So darker the color, the better it is, the higher the fertility. That means your crop will yield more output, and that's what you want. Okay, yeah, and so when you're planning your initial field where you want to put your farming field, uh, you want to keep the fertility level in mind. You don't want to just put it in a brown area because number one, it'll take really long time to weed out and get the soil ready to the farm. And number two, even after the area is ready to farm, the field is ready to farm, you'll still deal with a lot of weeding issue for several years before you can actually get the soil to be more fertile. Anyway, more on that later on. But for now, this let's look at this town right here. Here we have a very different field. The smaller field is what I started out with because it takes a lot of labor work to. It costs a lot of labor to get start the field. What I mean by that is, for instance, if I were to add a new field here, for example, see, the cost right there on that screen is 1,760. Now, if I make it bigger, then it's almost 2,156 costs. So that cost, the labor cost, or I don't even know what they call it, but I'm gonna say it's a labor cost, amount of effort your farmer has to put in to get the field going. Uh, so that cost is significant. So initially, when you're starting out, obviously you want to start something small. I would say start with the 6x5. You can nothing larger than that because larger than that you would require two farmers or two workers to maintain it. But 6x5 you can get away with one worker, so that's probably the most optimal one to start off with. And then as your city becomes bigger and you have more manpower to go around, and obviously you can extend it a bit bigger. And eventually, you want to start farming something large as this 10 by 10 or 12 by 12 field. So that's that. Then once you have the field going, then it becomes I don't want to say a headache, but it is something you have to constantly monitor and maintain. It's not something you can just set it and forget it. You have to maintain it. So what I mean by that is, for instance, we have this field here, and when you click on field, we have this window pops up, and there's a lot of information and controls that you can do here. So we have these 3 rows here. Each row is represented by year. So this is the current year, this is the next year, and then year after. So you have ability to plan basically 3 years at a time, and 3 running years, I should say. So next year, then these 2 will shift up, and you'll have another year that they'll be blank, and you'll have to come in and plant something. Okay. So then on the middle here is basically you have a fertility index here, where you can monitor your soil fertility level. The next one there is the weed level. The higher the weed, the less yield you're gonna have. Lower the fertility, the less harvesting yield you're gonna have. So you always want to increase the fertility. You want to decrease the weed. And finally, the right here is the rockiness. So for most part, I haven't really had to deal with too much with it, but obviously you can control that based on adding more sand or adding more clay. But the first 2 is the must. So when you're starting out, basically your weed's going to be almost 90 to 100%. So what you want to do is you want to plant this guy right here. Basically you're telling a farmer to basically do the field maintenance. So all your farmers will go out and start weeding the ground and making it ready for the farming. So if you're running into a lot of weeding issue, this is what you want to use. But then suppose you have the field ready, your weed is in control, you have the fertility high enough for you to plant, then this is where you have to start figuring out what do we need to plant. Okay, so normally rotation I do is I like to use this clover here, because the clover gives us increases the fertility. So if you look at the on the right side, there's some bars there, right? And if I look at the impact fertility bar there, second one from bottom, +5. So basically whenever I plant clover, what it'll do is it'll increase our fertility by 5. That's good. We want that, right? And then I follow up with either some grain, either corn, the wheat or the rye here, or even the flax. The wheat is my go-to things because it gives enough food for the cattle that we have, and we can also use this to turn it into bread. We can also use that to make some beer. So anyway, but planting wheat will suck your fertility level down. So you can see that bar index there, fertility index on the bar on the second one to the bottom on the right is -5. So basically every time I plant wheat, I'm going to lose 5 fertility. Okay, so anyway, you want to balance things out. So the way I balance it, I basically plant the clover first, and then I go with the grain, so I don't have a net 0 impact at the year end on the fertility. Okay, then the second year, what I like to do is rotate things out. I don't want to keep planting wheat or same thing over and over again. So here I'm going to use a black bean, because black bean can also give us 2 fertility, right? So, but then again, it also has a weed suppression of only 2. So this might go up slightly, but your fertility will go up just a bit. Okay. Then I also like to do flask after that. We can use that to turn it, make some cloth in our industry right there, cloth industry. So, but this obviously also has a negative fertility of -2. So you see what I've done here. I'm gaining 2 fertility, right, +2, and I'm also getting +2 here fertility as well. I'm sorry, -2 here. So the net impact is 0. So here net impact was 0 because +5 for clover, -5 for this wheat. So net 0, fertility is always same. Then here same thing, +2 and -2, so it's still 0. Okay, so going into third year, obviously our fertility, if we plant it in this rotation, it'll still be 65. Okay, so the year 3 we can sort of rotate it again. So I want some cabbage this year, some greens in the rotation. So here, I put in the green right there. That's gonna cause -3 for the cabbage or the green cabbage. Yep, -3. But then we gain 2 here, so net impact is -1. So anyway, as you plant your field, you want to rotate the field or the crop, so you're optimizing your fertility level and also you are optimizing your weed index. Um, anyway, another thing you want to do is mix around with the various fields. So like you want to make sure that you always have something going. So for example, here I'm gonna get cabbage in year 3. Here I'm getting cabbage in year 2, right? Right here I'm getting wheat. Right here I'm getting wheat, and I'm getting rye here. So as long as you're rotating all the crop, you will yield the highest uh, return, and that's always good because you definitely want to have enough crop to go around. And obviously, if you're planting a lot, then and if you're not using enough, then it'll spoil. So make sure you're also convert using those grain that you plant here in the cattle. You also want to make sure you're using that on your beer industry, for example, brewery. You're using the wheat to make some beer along with the honey and other things there. So anyway, that's the quick guide on farming. Uh, I also found that having this silo near the farm it reduces the workers' time. So that was also good. And then another thing I noticed I should mention is starting out, I used to run into a problem where wildlife was always eating up my crop every year. And I used to have fence around it. And but anyway, on as my town grew and as I added more and more field, and I also added some cattle, what I discover is that you don't necessarily have to have fence wrapped around your field. It could be a little bit further than what we normally put it right next to it, right? So in this case, on the north, I put it 3 blocks up, and then on my east side is all the way to the right here. And on the bottom, as you can see, I don't even have any fence. I'm assuming the water here provides the protection it needs. But and on the west side, this wall obviously gives the protection from wildlife. Even though I still have a little hole right here, but I don't think it seems to be impacting at all. So anyway, point is, you don't need to really have a fence all around it. As long as you have some fence in close proximity, I think you'll be fine. Here I have hunting going here, so I didn't want to disturb this hunting area. So I basically wrapped the fence around here, and these guys are not going into this field at all. So they used to, find a way. They used to travel all the way around, and they would go as far as they can go, and they'll try to sneak in from here or here. So as you can see, I had to put the wall right here, and that seemed to have done the trick there. They're no longer sneaking into the field. So anyway, this is farming in a nutshell. It's an interesting concept. I like it, but then I also hate it. I like it the fact that I can grow some food and I don't have to rely on hunter and fisher. But at the same time, I feel that the maintenance part is a bit too much, right? I shouldn't have to come and maintain the farming every year. It's just a distraction as you're trying to build and protect your town and do a lot of other things as far as managing the resource. Last thing, I mean, I get it. Farming is management of resource in a sense, but managing this rotation, managing the soil, and not only that, you also have to go to cattle and you have to set the hazing, right? Sometime you can do it directly on the field when you're weeding. Like right here, I can do that, and what it'll do is you'll actually increase the fertility. So for instance, if I look at the fertility, see I have been my cattle have been hazing here. Look how green that is. It's off the chart really. And this cattle has been hazing here, and the the fertility levels off the chart. So that's good. So what I'll do is I'll add another field here, and maybe I'll add another one here on the right side. Uh, then so anyway, just keep that in mind. If you have cattle, so you want to rotate them. Uh, in this town, I have 3 buildings, and each one of them has. Oh, this one has 19. Oof. Uh, so I had birth rate of 4 here, and I have another 4 here. So that's 12 cattle. And with 12 cattle, I almost don't even need to do hunting. I have enough food to go around. Another thing to point out about farming and fertility level is our compost yard, right? So as you're starting out the town, obviously, at some point you'll be forced to create a compost yard because otherwise your town will have sickness going around, and they won't be happy, and it just won't. It'll be ugly. It won't be fun. So the compost yard is a good way to basically collect the waste from the buildings, and that waste that gets collected and deposited into this compost yard basically builds up. Okay, and over a year, it may take maybe a year or so for that compost to turn into that you can put it into crops. So when that happens, it'll look something. Well, I don't have anything ready, but what will happen is when you click on it, this will say 100%. Then basically, what that means is compost is ready to be moved over into the field. So you click on it, then basically you'll have icon on top of a field saying add fertility, add compost basically. So you can add the fertility compost there to increase the fertility. And you can only do that once a year per the field. So if on this compost, if this is ready, then I can add this guy to maybe this field, and then if I have the second one ready, well, on the next one I have this ready, then I can add that to another field and so on. So as you can see, I already added the fertilizer in here, so I can't add any more for this year. I have to wait till next year. But anyway, that's another good way to keep your farming field fertility level high. The higher the better in a nutshell, because if it's not high enough, then you will miss out on the harvest. Like for example, on this clover, not clover, but cabbage last year, uh, I, I could have 62,006 cabbages, but instead I only harvested 1,563. That's almost loss of 25%. And that's probably because my fertility wasn't quite high enough, or wheat wasn't low enough. One of those two, or mixture of both, I should say. So you want to try to get the fertility highest possible, so your harvest is also higher. Uh, so anyway, in this one current year, clover 944, and it looks like I might make it to 944, but I won't know until it gets to the harvest. So anyway, we'll have to wait and see. So that's it in a nutshell for farming 101 in Farthest Frontier. Uh, Loving it so far. So anyway, I hope you are too. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.